hot one, we call it a sticking crab. The crab was about like this. Once in a while, we just tap on the accidental leave the what happened.
That's a nasty trap.
Yes, and the fillet the amber crab. It's fillet bubble and you put it right on the ambush. That's in the rolling one.
Yikes.
So one just found out let me down here. He himself turned the tap rolling like this.
Ooh.
The next one put the idea from the window. So you can this is the window crab. So one just tap on.
They're inventive with these
The next
traps.
one put the idea from the folding chair. Folding chair traps.
Oh my
Oh my gosh. That's nasty.
The next one here is the swinging trap. Just kept walking like the first time.
Cameras on.
And the next one the fish trap.
I tell you one time.
Fish trap.
We put a deep hole, not on around like this. So one just tap on this side or on the other side.
Oh,
Then just slide
it
out.
goes right through your foot.
Oh.
And if I put it by the other side.
Ay, ay, ay.
Seashore trap.
Oh.
The trap will keep balance like this. And when someone just step on either side, another side will be right on his face.
Just swings around and cuts it. That's pretty brutal. What do you think, Boo?
So crazy.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm back again, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than my usual cars and gaming videos. I've been out of the country for the last 3 weeks in Vietnam, and maybe you're asking why I was in Vietnam. The reason is because, much like my cars and video games, I imported my wife too. So she is a Vietnamese gal. And this past month, I guess, we went over to Vietnam to visit her parents, who she hadn't seen in, well, I guess a year. And we spent 3 weeks there, and we had a pretty good time. Now, maybe in another video I'll tell you like how I met my wife and everything, but this video I'm just gonna kind of tell you about my trip and stuff, and not make it too long, hopefully. And just tell you a little bit about Vietnam, actually, because I don't think most people in the States have ever been to Vietnam, you know, unless they were in the war or something. So I just tell you a little bit about it. Now, I first went in 2007, and that's when I first met my wife, actually. But Vietnam was actually a lot different country back in 2007. Very, very poor, very underdeveloped. I flew there into Ho Chi Minh City, which used to be called Saigon. I'm talking about in 2007. And it didn't look like that developed of a city. I mean, you had a lot of, you know, buildings and stuff, but you rarely see any buildings like over 4 stories tall. And we didn't spend too much time there at the time. We drove out of the city about 4 hours to my wife's hometown, Lam Xuang. I never say it right, but it's something like that. And it was a very poor town, let me tell you. You see, you know, almost no cars on the streets at all. Everyone's driving, you know, motor scooters and stuff. And it was just kind of a lot different country than I had ever been to before. I think I mentioned I've been to Thailand before, but Vietnam and Thailand are just like way, way different. So anyways, that was when I first met my wife, was in 2007. And the next time I went to Vietnam was just last year. And I was kind of surprised, just in the 12 years or whatever, that Vietnam had changed a lot. Like, there's a lot more development. Ho Chi Minh City was putting in these like skyscrapers, and kind of like the first time we didn't spend too much time in Ho Chi Minh City. We just went back to Lam Xuang to visit the family and everything. And Lam Xuang was a little busier than I remembered, and a lot like more businesses had moved in too. I was very surprised because like back in the 2000s, you'd almost see no foreign business there at all. you know, occasional, like, I think you'd see like Honda dealerships or like you know, like scooter dealerships, but I can't remember seeing any car dealerships at all even. And this time, you know, I see Toyota was there, Honda's there selling cars. You know, you got KFC there, you got Jollibee's there, and you know, things are just kind of a lot more commercialized. And even my wife was surprised too. She's like, "Wow, things are really picking up here." And so this year we went and we saw even more development. It was pretty wild. And you know, Vietnam's obviously a communist country still, so I was surprised to see it developing, you know, not as quickly as, say, a country like North Korea or Thailand, or South Korea or Thailand. But yeah, there's still a lot of money coming in there, probably from China, I'm guessing. And it was kind of interesting to see all the changes. Like, we went to Ho Chi Minh City first, like I said, and I think we spent about a week there total throughout the trip, because we went to Lam Shuang and then came back to Ho Chi Minh City in the last couple of days. And just within the last 2 or 3 years, they put in like this whole new area of the city with these giant skyscraper apartments and condos and stuff. And they have like a huge park around the area. And there's actually this building, which is now the tallest building in Vietnam, I believe. And it was like 81 stories tall. It's huge. And we were going to try to go up to the top of it, but we didn't really have the time, and the weather was bad, so we said, we'll do it next time we go. And I had never gone up in a building this high before, because we stayed right next to it in I think it was like mostly just condos, because you got like this commercial center with a giant 81-story building. And then you got all these buildings surrounding it that I think is just mostly like offices and condos for people to live in. But I think we were on the like 43rd floor or something, and my ears actually popped going up the elevator in this thing just because we were so high. And you know, I'll try to show you some little video clips and stuff while I'm talking to just give you an idea of what these things look like. And you know, in the bottom of this 81-story building, they had basically like a mall there, and I was surprised to see just like how nice it was. This is definitely a lot different than the Vietnam I remember back in 2007. And you know, they have all kind of like luxury stores there now, and they had a movie theater in the bottom of this thing, and an ice skating rink. You know, you saw little kids ice skating around and stuff in there. All kinds of restaurants, and I think above the mall area, which is like the first, I'd say 5 stories of this this giant building, I think it was mostly just offices and stuff above that. I'm not quite sure. Like I said, we didn't get to go to the top of it this time. But yeah, it's quite incredible to see. And in 2007, you'd see almost no cars on the road at all. You'd see maybe like 1 car for every 50 of these motor scooters that most people use. And now you see a lot more. You know, you still see more motor scooters than cars, especially you know, when you're not in the downtown area of the city. Most people can't afford cars, and the infrastructure in Vietnam is really just not even developed to accommodate cars at all. You know, this is a country where they were basically riding bicycles until 2007, or like the turn of the century. You know, and then 2000 and up, they started using more and more motorcycles and scooters and whatnot. Mostly, I guess you call them scooters. And so that's what everyone's driving, these, you know, little cheap scooters that people can afford. And only recently have people started driving cars at all. And I think, you know, in the new areas of cities that they're building, they're kind of starting to accommodate cars a little more, you know, with actual like places you can park them, and you know, just a little wider streets. But still, like, the majority of Vietnam's very poor, and you say you're going to visit someone in like the older, let's say a house that was built 20 years ago, on the street, there's not even going to be parking for your car. You got to go there in a bike pretty much. And so that was very interesting to see. And the reason people don't drive cars more, I think, is partly because the government doesn't want to pay for the infrastructure, and there's just not the infrastructure for it anyway. But also, if you buy a new car in Vietnam, you've got to pay a 250% import tax on it, because I think the government just doesn't want people driving cars. So, like, even the cheapest, like, crapmobile Hyundai that they make just for the Asia, you're gonna pay like the equivalent of 20,000 American dollars for it, which is more than most Vietnamese can afford, of course. And you know, it's just kind of like backwards over there still in terms of driving. But I got to drive the scooter around while I was there. I didn't have a license, which was a little worrisome, but my wife's friend there is like some kind of bigwig in the motor, like, vehicle department, I guess, like the equivalency of like the highway division or something there in Vietnam. So he lent me one of his government bikes that's got like a special plate on it. And that way, he said that, you know, the cops won't get you in this thing because they know it's our bike. And so I was driving this government bike around the whole time and kind of learning how to drive. It is terrifying, let me tell you. There are no rules on the road at all there. People don't stay in their lanes. They're driving all over the place. There's like absolutely no traffic lights around almost. And when there is, it kind of seems to be more of a suggestion. Like, people are still going, running red lights all over the place. I didn't see any cops around, like, pulling people over. It's completely different there. And the traffic just kind of flows kind of like water, I guess, going in, you know, down a sluice or something. You're in this mass of bikes when you're in traffic, and you kind of just try not to hit the people around you. And then when you come to an intersection, you know, you're trying to turn left or something, good luck, because you got to basically turn into oncoming traffic and just hope the people coming see you and don't run into you and go around you. It is crazy. But I kind of got used to it just driving there this past, 3 weeks I was there. And the adrenaline was high, so I could have a fun time doing it. And my wife and her brother also bought a new scooter for her parents that lived there, because they were down to like one scooter and it was kind of starting to die, so they wanted to buy another one for her parents. And her parents don't speak any English at all, so I kind of have to use like my wife to translate for me. Or I recently figured out how to use Google Translate on my phone, and I could kind of like talk with them on that, but it did not translate Vietnamese very well. But anyway, my father-in-law kind of gave me a crash course in driving there, so I was, able to learn a little bit. But I think next time I go, I'll probably want to get a license, just to avoid any cops that pull me over next time. I didn't get pulled over, luckily, but in case I ever do, they just take your bike if you're driving without a license, and the government will basically impound it until you figure out some way to get it back. So I'm going to avoid that next time. Let me see. Well, that was a tangent. What else can I tell you about Vietnam? Okay, so my trip specifically this time, we went there and we didn't do like a whole lot of like city hopping. We're kind of mostly in just Ho Chi Minh and Lam Xuang and the areas around those cities. And mostly we just kind of went around to various like temples. I think the temples in Vietnam are kind of like the big sightseeing attraction there. So, they're everywhere too. You see all kinds of Buddhist temples just everywhere. So we did a lot of the trip was just kind of going to see these things, and my wife's, praying at every one. I don't know, I guess you pray to Buddha when you're there or something. And she also took us, me and my wife's family, we went to these tunnels that they have there. Not like natural tunnels. These tunnels were left over from the wars, and they're called the Cu Chi tunnels, I think. And they were used by like the guerrillas back, I think, not only in the American War that they had, but also like I think the war they had in like the 50s with the French. I think that's when they started building these things. But I thought they're very interesting, and I've never heard of these things before. But there's like literally over 100 miles of these little tunnels that the Vietnamese basically just dug in the dirt there and made basically a little underground city where their troops are hiding and stuff during the war. And, you couldn't spot them from the air. I think that was the main point of building these things. So you got all these soldiers just kind of hiding underground, and then when their enemies come, they just, pop up out of these holes and shoot them. Or actually, I don't think they shot that many of them. They didn't have a lot of weapons back. I'm speaking in the American War. I don't think the Vietnamese had that many like guns and stuff. But what they would do is, they'd wait for the Americans and the other Vietnamese soldiers to come up, and they'd set traps for them, or they'd pop out of these holes and shoot them, like I said. And they'd also find unexploded bombs that the Americans would drop on the ground, and they'd take out like the central core of the bomb and make a mine out of it. And they put these mines everywhere too. So it's really, really crazy how this war happened. And even with all these tricks and stuff, though, the Vietnamese, the Cu Chi guerrillas just got bombed anyway. And we had a tour guide there, kind of giving us a tour of them. And he took us down in the tunnels and told us how everything worked. And they have all kinds of places there. But he said, I think he said like 80% of these people in the tunnels just got wiped out. I mean, it was a slaughter. But the government has since then made the place kind of like a national, like a protected national monument, I guess. So we got a little tour, and it was kind of interesting. The tour guides, you gotta get like a special one to speak English for you. So we got one tour guide to take my wife's family and her friends on a separate tour to speak Vietnamese to them. And then my wife and I got another tour guide to take us around and just speak English with us. And even though like he knew I was an American, it was still kind of like a propaganda tour. And I asked my wife's mom after the tour too, I'm like, did your guy like try to propagandize you guys? And she's like, oh yeah, that's what they do here. The communist government runs this thing, so they're not telling you that much truth about what actually happened in the war. They were telling us at first that there weren't any Vietnamese actually fighting each other, and that it's a common misconception that the Vietnamese were fighting each other, and that only the Americans wanted to take over Vietnam. So that's why all the Vietnamese came together and were fighting the Americans. I'm looking at my wife, I'm like, and I didn't want to say anything, and I didn't want to get us in trouble or anything. But later I kind of tricked him. I said, so who is the leader of the Southern Vietnamese? Because, it was like basically a civil war between the North and the South. And then he finally let it spill, and he's like, oops. And I learned a lot about the war that I hadn't learned, actually, mostly from my wife's mom, who kind of enjoys history, and she was alive during the time. She was just a little girl, though, so she doesn't, remember like all the horrible things that were happening. But she still, kind of harbors ill will, towards the communist government and everything, because, I don't know how much you guys know about the Vietnamese war that, the Americans went and fought, but basically it was like a war to stop communism there, and the Ho Chi Minh's government was basically just going down and trying to take over all of Vietnam, which America had interest in back then. And so that's why America came in to kind of defend our interests and stop the spread of the Ho Chi Minh government coming. And we had tons of Vietnamese allies. You know, they didn't want the Ho Chi Minh communists taking over either, so that's why they were fighting them. And according to my wife's mom, we almost won that war, actually. And like, we're beating up all the communists, and then, so I don't know if this is going to be political for some people, but you know, we almost had the war won, and then at the last minute there was like kind of like a mix-up of the top leaders in the South, and I guess like a kind of a pro-communist leader somehow got swapped into like the leadership roles for our side, and they basically kind of just turned everything on its head, and they said, okay, you know, we got to stop all the fighting, you know, bring all the troops back. And I'm not sure why exactly, I don't know all the details, but it sounds like we just kind of almost had the war won, but then at the last second we just got kind of shut down, I guess. I don't know, very strange. And I'd actually like to learn more about what happened you know, in the future. Anyways, that was kind of a weird tangent too. Yeah, so we saw these Gucci tunnels. That was probably, actually that might have been the highlight of the trip, seeing these things, and just you know, we went down in them, and I barely fit in them. I had to go down, and I was basically like crawling on almost on my hands and knees. I didn't want to like get down there and get all dirty, but I was kind of crawling on my feet, and I barely fit in these things. And they actually said that the tunnels used to be smaller when only the Vietnamese were using them. I guess they made the tunnels a little bigger so tourists could come in and get through them a little easier.
Let's go.
Ready to go down the tunnel?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay, let's go now.
You first, boo.
Tôi đang là Trúc hay là Giang?
Trúc.
Trúc hả? Are you okay, Phil?
I'm good.
Please love me together.
Hey, hold on. You had just some over here.
Come closer.
Honey, come here.
I'm coming.
Are you okay?
But I can't imagine life for these guys, living in these tunnels, and they're just scurrying around and getting their food, and they're going to one tunnel room and making weapons, going to another tunnel room, having meetings, and another tunnel room, you got sleeping quarters, I guess. It was kind of crazy. And if you ever go there, I'd recommend going and seeing it. It's just kind of a strange thing to see, even though you get propagandized by the government there. And yeah, basically the rest of the trip, we just kind of went around seeing these temples. And we were visiting a lot of friends of my wife's and her family and stuff, and hanging out with them. And we were doing a lot of shopping. My wife's getting presents for everyone back here and stuff. I actually didn't come back with too many souvenirs, though. The only souvenirs I really got were these two little foo dog guys here. And we were at one of the little temples, and I guess it was like a monk that my wife's family knew, so we stopped to talk with him a little bit. And I couldn't talk to this guy at all. He was just speaking Vietnamese, but he had like a collection of these guys, and I said, oh, that's a pretty cool little collection he got. He had all kinds of little trinkets and stuff too. And he just said, oh, well, I'll give you these two little guys, and these are special because they're like a red rock instead of a green rock. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And he said, you know, take care of them because they're kind of rare, I guess. And after we got out of the temple, my wife's mom like jumped on me. She's like, "Those are special. Don't do anything with them except take care of them." I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm going to put these on my little game shelf, and they're supposed to be lucky and infuse power or something like that. I think they're cool to look at anyway. I like these little foo dogs. I think I don't think they're called foo dogs in Vietnam. I think they call them dragons or something, but that's what I've always called them. And I also did a little game hunting while I was there too. Probably not enough to mention in this video, especially I know this video is getting a little long, but I'm going to make another video after this about a little game hunting I did there and in Japan, because on our layover there, on the way back, we got to stop in Japan for a little bit of time. So I will do that next time. And is there anything else I want to mention? Well, I guess that's it for now. If you got any questions, let me know. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
I saw a bunch of lights there. I thought that's something down here.
What is this place? Whoa. Look at it. Oh, we got the house. Watch out. Look out! Crazy.
It's like a hotel, right?
Huh?